We've all heard that Fortnite performance mode is the best rendering mode for the best performance, and it makes sense. It is actually called performance mode. But for AMD users, there's some tweakers that will say that DirectX 12 is actually better. And then I've also heard from non-AMD users, so Intel users, which is the same as me, that DirectX 11 gives them better performance, which to me doesn't make sense. So today I'm going to be trying every rendering mode on low settings, so the most optimized they can be, and I'm going to benchmark them and see which is the best and answer the question for myself. Now, if this video is insightful, or if it helps boost your FPS like it did for all these people on screen right now, drop a like, subscribe, and yeah, let's get straight into this. Firstly, I'm just going to show you what I'm running currently. So these are my current game user settings. You can pause the video, you can have a look. I'll show you them in game as well. These are the performance mode settings that all pro players are using, and if you want to get them, you can join my Discord to find the download. There's also more optimized versions for mid-tier PCs specifically, and also very, very low-end PCs. These basically drop some of the graphics a little bit more in the back end, which you can't always do in the game itself, and it is objective that these will give you the best performance mode performance. But who knows, maybe DX11 or DX12 is even better today. Alright, so starting with my performance mode settings. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this to unlimited. Let's change the 3D resolution to 100 just for now. Just therefore everything is consistent. And we're going to go into this benchmark endgame FPS test. And here's where we're going to run our benchmark. As you can see in the top right hand corner, I'm using frame view to get its FPS overlay. That's more for aesthetics though, because I'm going to use CapFrameX to actually capture performance and run the benchmark. Now I'm capping my FPS for this demonstration, but just so you know how it's going to work, this is exactly what's going to happen, and it's simulating an endgame experience. I'm going to run this 3 times each for 20 seconds. Then I'm going to take the best of those 3 and use that as the average for all of them. For full clarity, so you guys can see, this is how I'm recording it. I'm obviously not going to record on OBS and show you it because that will affect the performance. But right here, it's taking a capture. The capture time on 20%, this one just finished. And there we go. We now have all 3 recordings. Benchmarking using this map. Okay, so here are the 3 recordings. I'm going to call this one performance mode. And I'm going to do that for all of them here so we know which is which. Now I'm going to change my rendering mode to DX11, restart my game, and then we're going to come back and do the same thing. Just so you can see, rendering mode DirectX 11 is now set. And if I scroll down, all my settings are on low here. All right, so now I've captured them on DirectX 11. I'm just gonna rename them here. DirectX 11, DirectX 11. There we go. I now need to change my rendering mode to DirectX 12, but it isn't this simple. Actually, to ensure this loads correctly, we have to actually close our game beforehand. We need to open our Epic Games Launcher, go to Library, Fortnite, Options, and we're going to install high-resolution textures. And I'm only doing this because this is standard for DirectX 12, even though we will be using essentially the lowest settings. If you are naturally using this and have been, you probably will have that package installed. So I'm going to wait. This could take a little bit. I'm going to launch my game, trust that it's on low settings, and then we're going to come back with all the results, put them together, trim them down, and compare and see which is best. All right, I've done it. I've finally got all the results. This took longer than it should have. But right here, performance mode, 3 for each, DX11, and then DX12. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called aggregation. So I'm going to put them all together. All these 3 go in here. So this is the performance mode. We're going to aggregate them, excluding outliers, just for benefit of the doubt. And as you can see, we're using 1% lows and 0.1% low averages. Just aggregate them here. Okay, performance mode. I'm just going to AG for aggregation. Put that into the comparison. Now let's do the same for the DirectX 11. Let's exclude outliers. It's going to combine them all here. Let's put that into the comparison. And then now our DX12. So let's exclude that. All right, here we go. Here is everything. For some reason, the 0.1% lows were completely bugged. Something clearly has went wrong here because this is incredibly inaccurate. For example, this at the top is performance mode. The 1% lows just definitely weren't that bad. I think maybe it hitched incredibly hard, to the point where it didn't even include it as an outlier, and it's just telling me that my lowest FPS was 5. I mean, even the 1% average here is insane. Like, this is incredibly inaccurate. Nonetheless, working around that, looking at DX11, this is right here at the bottom, and then DX12 is in the middle. Now, because unfortunately we can only really base it off one thing here, considering the 1% low average and the 0.1% low averages, that averages are completely scuffed, we have to look at the actual average FPS. So just this blue option here. And as we can see on my specs, an i9 4900K with 3070, bear in mind Fortnite is CPU intensive, we can see that performance mode, this one right at the top, is at 516 FPS. So this is the highest out of all of them, as expected. Performance mode performed best per average FPS. DirectX 11 though is actually slightly less FPS than DX12. But if you want to then bring in the 1% lows and 0.1% lows in this case, which I don't think is accurate, obviously we can see that DX12 was some reason more stable out of all of them in general. Like, we do have some 0.1% lows. The lowest FPS dropped was to 178. That's very, very circumstantial. You're never really it's gonna be hard to get this. 1% lows were 281. And I don't know, I just think that's incredibly interesting. I'm still nonetheless inclined to think that DX11 would perform better, but maybe there isn't much difference here, because the only thing I installed was the high resolution textures, which I didn't really put into play. I guess it installed shaders, but the game, because of my settings, visually looked the same. So I'd say these pretty much performed the same. And I guess if you're on AMD in this case, which I cannot test. I think that may be the distinction between DX11 and DX12, is in DX12 may then perform better. Because again, if we're just going to focus on average FPS in this case, because it's the only thing we can unfortunately go off with full confidence, it's only like a 1 FPS difference here. So yeah, if you're on AMD, definitely give that a look, because even from DX11 and DX12 to performance mode, the frame difference isn't crazy. And again, we were looking at an end game scenario. So that, 20 FPS difference would honestly make a big difference. I'm sure if the 1% and 0.1% low averages were accurate, I'm very confident here based on my knowledge that performance mode definitely would have came out on top. I mean, getting rid of these and just keeping our end game performance mode recording, if I actually put in this one right here, this, believe it or not, is that same system just in creative mode. So I'm on a completely blank flat creative map basically, looking up into the sky, and this is the result I got. So right here, the top one we're seeing creative mode with the exact same settings, and the bottom one we're seeing in-game or end-game, which is obviously different to like a mid-game scenario with the same setting. So I think that's just something to note. That 500 FPS for some may seem low. This is realistically close to 1000 FPS in creative mode. And we can also now see 1% low averages and 0.1% low averages, and how this just doesn't seem to make sense, because this is actually very realistic. And of course, this would probably, if we're based off the average FPS again, this may half, right? And this may half, but it definitely wouldn't be 5. Or looking at this 1% low averages, it definitely wouldn't be 39. That's such a, massive jump. Obviously, unless something was seriously wrong. And how do I know? Maybe something is wrong with my system. But at least what we can take out of this video is that the difference isn't crazy, but performance mode is better. And especially looking at this, if we're going to use performance mode in creative, yeah, it's incredible. And also for my PC nerds or benchmarking nerds, this is aggregated excluding outliers. I did about 10 different tests. I think recorded on 90 seconds each. I'm not too sure, but granted, it could be a little skewed. So wrapping this up, what we can conclude is performance mode is generally better, but I still would say if you're on AMD, go and give that a go. I can't do it myself, but maybe try out DirectX 12. I definitely wouldn't recommend DX11 really for anyone. It may not be the hugest difference in FPS, but it does definitely help. And again, if we could see them 0.1% lows, I'm sure they are way better, which in turn would mean lower input delay. Now, once again, if you guys want 900 FPS in creative, just like me, of course it isn't that simple. But if you want to try and get FPS like that, join my Discord server and you can get my exact settings I use for that benchmark right here. And again, I also have some for mid-tier and lower NPCs, which will give even more performance. And even if you're on high-end or a system similar to mine, at least, not crazy high-end, but you could still use these and push even more performance. I think if I use these settings actually in that creative mode test, I would have been way over 1000 FPS.